So Val, thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. So as Joe said, most of everybody who's on the phone right now has signed up for one of our evaluations, which is free from MaaS360.com. So now it's time to learn how to make the most of it. This session will provide a quick overview of setting up the basics for your MaaS360 portal account and configuring it for some of the advanced mobile device management options. Today we'll cover a number of things, including configuring the MaaS360 services, uploading your APNS for iOS device management, configuring the enrollment settings, and we'll enroll 2 devices, an Android and an iOS that I have here that I'll be able to share with you. We'll talk about managing your device policies, how you can find devices, and also actions that are available for those devices for your optimal management from an IT perspective. So before jumping into the session, I did just want to quickly review our MaaS360 mobile device management cloud-based infrastructure. There's a number of pieces that we can implement in an environment, and the ActiveSync Manager requires our cloud extender to interface with either your Exchange server or your Lotus Traveler server. iOS enrollment requires an APNS from Apple, but it does provide you the enhanced policy options like wireless and VPN profile deployment and selective VoIP capabilities. Android enrollment requires a lightweight agent from the marketplace that we host for enrollment and also opens options and device actions, specifically like a locate device. Everything is managed in a single window with access to mobile intelligence reporting and dashboards. So with that, we're going to hop right into the portal. I'm just going to go ahead and share my desktop here, and you'll see that I have signed up for an evaluation online, much like you have. And right now, we see our Getting Started checklist. So we try to make it as easy as possible for you to implement the solution in your environment. So the first thing we're going to do is configure our MaaS360 services. And this will allow me to upload my Apple MDM certificate that I've already procured from Apple. And if you have questions about that process, we do have a pretty nice document that details out how to go about getting the certificate from Apple and then how to generate it. I've already went through those pieces, so I'm going to go ahead and upload my certificate here. And it's just a PFX file that will live on your desktop, or a P12 file, depending on where you generated it from. I'm going to add the certificate password that I used when I created it, and then the topic, which is also known as the bundle ID. And I'm going to hit save. So now you'll see that my Apple MDM certificate is uploaded and ready to go. And when I signed up for the trial, Android was already enabled by default. We also have the ActiveSync piece, which we're not going to go directly into today, but if you have questions about that, you can certainly contact me after the webinar, and we could set up a separate session. But that would allow you to control any device attached to your Exchange ActiveSync servers or your Lotus Traveler servers. I'm going to go ahead and hit close, which will take me back to my main screen here. And our next option is to configure our device enrollment settings. We have 3 ways that you can enroll a device over the air into MaaS360. The first way is by using a unique passcode, which will be sent to every individual user. This is a one-time passcode that allows the user to enroll in the service. We also allow you to do an authentication against your corporate Active Directory if you're using Microsoft's Active Directory. And this will allow the user to just type in their username and password from their corporate environment to get authenticated. And then we have a 2-factor authentication, which is a combination of the passcode and the corporate Active Directory in case you need an extra layer of security. For our purposes today, we'll use passcode settings. And for your iOS devices, you also have the ability to distribute your Exchange settings down to that particular device. So I'm going to go ahead and configure that for one of our demo zones here. And you just type in your ActiveSync email server address and check whether or not you use an SSL connection. And I'll go ahead and click Save again here. And this will take us back to our home screen as well. So at this point, you've pretty much done everything you need to do to enroll a device. So pretty quick, pretty simple. And now we're going to actually enroll a device. I'm going to do the Android device first, and by doing this, I'm going to select my platform. I'm going to enter my corporate username. In this instance, I'm going to use a test account. I'm going to type in my domain of my environment, followed by my email address. And the information used on this enrollment form is directly used to log into the enrollment and to set up your email settings as well. This is a corporate-owned device, so we allow you to select your ownership and also which policy set you'd like to apply. We do create default policy sets for you to copy to formulate your policy that you want to use in your environment. This particular policy right now isn't restricting anything. And then we have notification mechanisms. So email to user would send the email to the user who you are enrolling. Email to me will copy you as the administrator just in case that user has an issue that you'll have the information. And then you also have the ability to send an SMS to the user so they can click on the enrollment request easily. I'm going to go ahead and click Send Request, and here you'll see that I'll get my enrollment request. We provide the URL, the corporate identifier, and the passcode of that particular device so that you can enroll. So for my purposes, we're going to use my Android here. And I'm going to go ahead and get logged back onto it. And I'm going to use my barcode scanner to actually enroll. So if you do have a Android or an iPhone that has one of the QR readers installed, you can just go ahead and take a picture of that particular QR code and click Open Browser. And that will give you a quick link down to our service. So here you'll see that we're going to redirect the user out to the marketplace after we hit the Start button. And we'll download and install the latest Android agent for MaaS360. And this will just take a few moments. We're using a VNC connection here to our rooted devices, so please bear with me as we walk through this process. But here you'll see the MaaS360 MDM for Android install. I'm going to go ahead and install it just like any other application for Android. And if I pull my notification bar down, you'll see here that we are installing presently, just over the wireless connection, so it should be fairly quick. And once that's completed, it will take us through the enrollment process where we'll enter our passcode and our corporate identifier and get connected to MaaS360. And then we'll go through a very similar item here for the iPhone. So right now you can see that MaaS360 MDM for Android has successfully installed. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and it's going to take me into our application. From here I'm going to type in my corporate identifier. And this is a unique identifier that identifies your company in our system to your little piece of MaaS360. I'm going to enter my email address here. Now, for the Androids, just as I'm typing here, we do have touchdown integration that we recently released. If you have a deal with NitroDesk, we can help users configure touchdown. And we are also able to push mail settings into the native Android email clients to help the user set up their mail. So here you'll see that I'm going to enter the passcode that MaaS360 gave me. And again, this is the part that would be skipped if you were using the Active Directory integration, because the user would just enter their corporate credentials. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and we're going to hit Continue, and now it's going to continue with the enrollment process. I'm going to accept the terms and agreements, and then I'm going to accept MaaS360 as the device administrator. And this is much like setting up any type of mail or anything else on an Android, where it gives you the information of what the device administrator is going to be able to do. I'm going to accept that and go ahead and say Activate. And then you see here that our device has been enrolled, and we can go ahead and close out of here. Now I'm going to go back to the home screen and into my application list. And now I'll see there's a MaaS360 application that I can open and talk to here. All right, let's hop back to the portal for a moment. And here you'll see my enrollment request is completed. And here's the device name, the Samsung SGH phone, which I'm using for this purpose. And that's going to take me right into the device summary of that particular device. So right now I'm going to do a refresh just to get all the most recent information into the portal here. And you'll see the policy has come down. And from here you'll also see a list of other actions that we can take on the device. So if the device were to be lost or stolen, I could send a locate to the device to see where it may be located at in the environment. You can send a message down to the device in case a user was out of compliance, for example. You could create a message and tell them that they were out of compliance and send it to have them take some sort of action. We also have workflows in the system to send a remote lock of that device. After sending the remote lock of the device, you could reset the device passcode. This is good for users who forget their passcode. You as the administrator could send a remote reset. You could do a selective wipe of the device. Now this integrates directly with our touchdown integration and also with the native email settings. So if you did have a user who was out of compliance per your policy, you could do a selective wipe on that device to remove the email. And once you found the user back into compliance, you would be able to revoke that wipe. Android also offers the full wipe, which is back to factory defaults. You can change the policy, or you can remove Android control, which will remove MaaS360 as the device administrator. Okay, so you'll see here that we do have now our hardware inventory populated within a couple seconds there, and that gives us the manufacturer and the model, how much free space, the email address of the person who's enrolled. The network information is blank because I don't have a SIM in this particular device, and you can see the security and compliance information for the device as well. So here I can tell that my device is rooted, that hardware encryption is not supported. Most Androids don't support any type of hardware encryption outside of the Zoom and the Droid Pro that's released. You can look at the Android policy and whether or not it's in compliance. So now that we looked at some of the actions, I want to show you some of the other device information that we can find. So if I look at the list of software installed on this device, I can easily see what the user might be doing. So here we have a couple games that are installed. We can see the MaaS360 application, and we can see the barcode scanner, for example. This is interesting information because it will show you the amount of size and data that's being taken up on the phone, and also help you identify any applications that you may want to restrict from the users. Just to populate some information, I'm going to quickly send myself a message here. And we do prompt for passcodes everywhere along the way to make sure that you're actually taking action that you want to do. So now if I bring my Android back up, you can see in the upper right, upper notification area, there's a little MaaS360 icon that I can now pull down, and I can see that there's my test message. So it's very simple and quick to deploy actions down to the actual devices. And now when I hop back into MaaS360, if I look at the action history, I can see that vHetrick sent a message to that phone on this particular date and that it was received by the phone. So we do have a full audit history of each action that's taken on the device in case something were to happen to that device that you needed to prove any type of audit history, such as if the device got stolen and you needed to prove that it had been wiped. So I'm going to go back to my results here for a moment, and we're going to go ahead and get the iPhone enrolled. So here I'm going to select pretty much the same information that we did before because I am the same user who's going to enroll. And the iPhone works a little bit differently from an enrollment process perspective. Each of them have their own unique routes that Google and Apple take. So here you'll see that I selected an employee-owned, so for folks who are tracking personal-owned devices, you can see that's fairly easy to do there. And I'll show you some of our groups a little bit later that will give you some more information from that side too. So here I'm going to pull my iPhone up, And I'm going to go ahead and hop into Safari because I don't have a good QR code reader on this phone. One of the things we did recently per our customer request was actually to shorten the URL that was being used for enrollment. And the reason we did this was because a lot of the tablet machines that are out there, the iPads, for example, don't have any type of 3G or text messaging capability on them, depending on what model you buy. So we took the advice of our customers and made that URL a little bit shorter. So here we're going to go ahead and start our mobile device enrollment process, very similar to the Android. We're going to enter our new passcode that we got. And again, these are one-time passcodes, so if the user does fail the authentication, you would have to send them a new one. Just a nice little security ad that we have there. So we're going to go ahead and hit continue. And this will bring us into our terms for acceptance. We'll go ahead and click continue again, and now we'll start to install the MDM profile. Now, the Android devices just utilize the Google C2DM network, so you only require a Google email address to be created in order to be able to talk to that network. Now, Apple does require the APNS that I mentioned earlier, so what we're actually downloading right now is part of that certificate. So we're generating that key. And once the key is generated, we will be able to install the policy profiles, and I'll show you some of the information on the phone from that side. This is an older model of an iPhone, so sometimes it takes a little bit longer to associate here, but we'll continue to go through. So now we're enrolling the certificate, if you saw that change there. You can, of course, click on the More Details button if you need to see any additional details. And now we're installing that profile. Now that the profile is installed, we're going to go ahead and install the rest of our policies. So here you'll see the SDEP enrollment request, which is part of the Apple communication. Another nice thing on this screen is under the description, we do show your account number, just in case you have any troubles enrolling your phone. When you talk to our support folks, we can identify your company with your account number, as well as your account name. So again, just trying to make it as simple as possible from an enrollment perspective. This key should be generated in just a moment here. And then we'll move into the policies. Again, I selected my default iOS policy, which isn't enforcing anything. I will show you a change to the policy and how that would work on the phone. But for example, if you wanted to have a passcode policy enforced right after the enrollment, the passcode would pop up right on the phone after the enrollment was completed and force the user to set that enrollment password. While this continues, I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I did just want to show you the different statuses we have here. So here now you see that my request was pending from before when it was just started. And then once we're enrolled here, it will change over to complete and give us a quick link to that phone. So here the profile is installed. We're going to go ahead and click the Done button, and you're going to be brought back to the mobile device management screen where you can close that browser window. So I'm going to hop back to the home screen. And there's not an application that we put on the phone in terms of the iOS side, but we do push down a profile. And if you go into Settings in General, you'll be able to see that MaaS360 MDM profile down there. And you'll also be able to see the details of that particular item here. So here's the certificate and the signing certificate, and then your mobile device management. And as we were sitting here, the policy came down, and you'll remember earlier where I put my exchange information in. Well, here's now where it's telling me that I need to enter my password for my exchange account. And I'm just going to go ahead and cancel out of there. But you can see how we can integrate and make that simple so you don't have to give your ActiveSync settings to your end users. All right, I'm going to jump back to the portal here. And you can now see we're completed and my iPhone's enrolled. The Apple information is a little bit different than the Android information, but it's all fairly the same type of data. Apple and Google do have separate APIs for their MDM functionality that they give out. So here we'll take a look at the actions quickly. We can do a refresh of the device. We can do a remote lock. You can clear the passcode on the device, And then you'll see the same options are available here that were for Android in terms of the selective wipe, the full wipe, changing the iOS policy, or removing iOS control. So I can try to coordinate a thing here to show you how to lock the device if I'm fast enough. So here I'm going to send a lock. I'm going to type my password. And you'll see here that the phone locked within a matter of seconds. As it refreshed itself and took me right back online on that instance. I'm going to attribute that right to the VNC selection since I have an active connection to it. But in any case, you can see that the actions do deploy quite quickly. Looking at the summary information, you'll see very similar things here. Again, you can look at the hardware or the software that's installed on that phone. This one was just wiped, so there's not necessarily any software that is installed. So we'll take a look at the security and compliance section, which most people are interested in as well. Here we can tell if the device is jailbroken. We can see what policy is installed, what level of hardware encryption is available on the device. Depending on if you have an iPhone 3, 3GS, or a 4, this may look a little bit differently. There are 2 levels of hardware encryption that Apple have, block and file. And we can see that we are in compliance right now. We can also look to see what's running on the phone. So here I have a restriction policy and an active sync policy. Our default restriction policy doesn't allow explicit music, so that's the restriction that we're seeing there. And if you look down below, you can see that in a little bit more detail in terms of what you would look at on your phone. I'm going to jump back to the home screen for a moment because we did use our quick links to get right into the devices to view the information. So I'm going to jump back and show you our watch list. And the watch list is meant to give you some varied pieces of information about your environment in terms of your security posture as well as your device posture. So here we can see that 2 devices are being managed and 2 have been reported in the last 7 days, which is because I just enrolled them. One of my devices have weak encryption, and that would be the Android device. And one of the devices do not have passcode protection enabled, which would be the iPhone. And you can see we also track various pieces of information down below here that will give you an idea of who you may need to go after to make sure that they're in compliance with your security settings. One of the new things we added recently is the ability to edit the watch list. So say, for example, it's not in your interest to know who's had a SIM change in the last 7 days. You can click on the little pencil, and you can go ahead and change that setting. So maybe I really want to know who's had a SIM change in the last 15 minutes. I can go ahead and make that adjustment quickly here and change the text up top and save it, and then that's going to reflect the information on the watch list here. So here you can see that updated item for the last 15 minutes. So it's pretty flexible in allowing you to track what you want to look at. The watch list is also emailed out to the administrators either on a daily or on a weekly basis, and that's up to you to set when you sign up for the trial. I did want to take a look at the policies, which I think is probably the guts of the system in terms of what you want to protect in your environment. So let's look at the default iOS MDM policy. And here you can see all the different items that we allow you to track in the system. Here we can look at the device passcodes, your device restrictions. So here's where I was referring to the explicit music, but you can see here that you could also block the use of a camera or FaceTime or screen capture. If you have any type of corporate or guest wireless networks you'd like to push down, you can adjust the wireless settings and deploy those properly from our MaaS360. The VPN profiles also can be deployed if you're using Cisco or Juniper, and then they also do some generic L2TP and PPTP. And then the active sync settings. And the active sync settings were already populated from us setting our iOS settings earlier. One of the other popular items that our customers have been using are the web clips. And a web clip is just the ability to deploy an icon with a shortcut to a web page or an application onto your phone. I'm going to go back to the results real quick and show you how you can create a new policy, which we would suggest from a testing perspective. A test policy just lets you create another policy that you can assign to your users to ensure that it's working the way that you want it to work before you deploy it out to everybody. So here we're going to copy from our default policy. This will just take a moment to create. And I'm going to click the Edit button, and this will show you how easy it is to use our policy self-service. So here I decided I want a passcode. I'm going to allow a simple passcode just for the purposes of this demo. But you can see that we do integrate items such as number of failed passcode attempts before your data is erased. So very similar to some of the BlackBerry policies that you guys might be used to from a management perspective. Device restriction, I'm going to disallow the use of my camera, which also disallows the use of FaceTime because FaceTime relies heavily on the camera. And then from an ActiveSync perspective, I'm going to change my date range here because I really only want 3 days of mail on that phone. So now that I'm happy with my policy settings, I can click Save and Publish, which will make that policy available to be assigned to people. Like everything else in the system, we allow you to do a full audit history, so I can type some notes for anybody else that may want to see what I've done here. And this will show up in our audit history. We also recently did a Show Me the Differences Before Publishing, which will just give you a quick review of the items that you changed in the system. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So anything in green is new, and anything that has been made red was a deleted value. So you can see here what I've changed. It's pretty intuitive to tell you what you've done. And then we're going to go ahead and confirm that publish out. And now this will push it out to all the different areas. We do some validation checks as well to make sure that everything matches up properly. So if you try to set, one policy that doesn't make sense with another, we will tell you about that. We also allow you to look at the audit history that I was talking about earlier. So here you can see my comments. You can see who made that change, what the version is, and when the transaction date was. So now that I've created my policy, I want to deploy that to my test user. So I'm going to go back into my device view, and here I can see my iPhone and my Android. And since I made an iPhone policy, I'm going to change my iPhone. And one of the things I'll show you just from a quick search perspective, if I knew the user's name or what their device name was and wanted to find them quickly, I could use our quick search up at the top there and go right into that device. So here, I'm going to go ahead and change my iOS policy, and I'm going to put myself into the iOS test, and I'm just going to say test user for my tracking purposes. Again, we make sure that you really want to deploy that to the user, and we're going to click OK. And now on the iPhone, within a couple of seconds here, we should see the settings change for some password prompts and whatnot. And while we do that, we'll just go back to the home screen here. All right, we're going to let that sit for a minute so we can get that information down. And in the meantime, I am going to just show you quickly the Android policies and some of the options you have available to you there. So in the Android policies, Google hasn't surfaced as many items as Apple has, but the basic device management is there where you can set device passcodes. We also allow you to enforce device encryption for devices that support encryption, and you'll see here that that's supported with devices on 3.0 and higher at this point. And then we also allow you to set a lot of the restrictions. So most everything on the Android is user-controlled out of the box. You can edit these settings to force them to be enabled or disabled if you don't want the user to be able to change it. The application restrictions allow you to restrict a particular application from being installed on the device. So if you did not want to allow people to play Angry Birds all day at the office, you could go ahead and submit that as a request. And if the user did not remove Angry Birds, they would be taken out of compliance. And when they're out of compliance, I'll show you a couple of the items that you can do to make sure that they don't want to go out of compliance. Again, you can deploy your wireless settings. The VPN is only supported right now on Motorola devices with the EDM API, such as the Droid Pro. Here you'll see our active sync account settings. I haven't set that up yet, but I certainly could have just by clicking the edit button. And then we have our device management. Now the device management allows you to do two things. One, you can tell the user that they are not allowed to disable the MaaS360 as the mobile device administrator. And you can make an enforcement action if somebody does disable that service. So if I open that up, you can see here, you could send a remote wipe if they tried to remove enforcement. You could lock them out of their email by doing a selective wipe. You could just lock it, or you could do nothing. We also allow you to define your enforcement action. So this would be if you pushed a passcode down to the device, for example, and the user chose to ignore it. After a certain amount of minutes, you could take an action on that device as well. So you'll see you have more control over that device depending on what the user decides they want to do or not. So here we'll go back to our results. And the next thing I wanted to show you were some of our device groups. So here we have our device groups that we've made some canned ones in the system that you can leverage that are popular. So here you can see all devices or Android devices, or if you wanted to look at your iPad population versus your iPhone population, you can see that information there. You can also create your own device groups by clicking the Create Device Group button, and that will allow you to create a search for your particular phones. So if I wanted to, for example, find all the phones that belong to myself here, I could go find my username and say I want to see everything that contains VH2, and I'll click Search. And down below you'll see all the options will show up. Here you can do a Save Search as Device Group. You can also adjust columns if you wanted to see some additional information. So maybe it's important to me to see the email address in this listing. Now you can see my email address shows up. I can move around these columns if I want to save their preferences. And then here, I may want to use this again, so I'm going to go ahead and save that search as a device group, because I know that this VH person synchronizes a lot of devices and I want to know when they come in. So here we'll save that device group, and then that will show back up under your device groups. Now, one of the other important things you can do in a device group setting is take an action on those users' devices. So here, if I wanted to apply a iOS policy or an Android policy in bulk, you could do that from the device groups. A better example of that is if you have a separate passcode policy for your executives, which we find fairly common. Here, instead of doing individual assignments to each of the users, you could apply the policy to the entire group. You also have the ability here to hide old records, to edit the group. So say I wanted to change the name or the description of the search, I could do that, or I can delete that group. Groups can also be made private or public. If you make them public, it's for anybody who logs into the portal from your environment. If they're private, only your administrator will see access to that. So that's kind of the device groups. One of the other items that I was going to cover was around our custom attributes. So I'm going to go find my iPhone here again. And if I go to the Hardware Inventory tab, you'll see that we have custom attributes that you can edit. And if I click the Edit button, that will open up information here where I can set additional information about this particular phone. And you can see where this could come in handy if you had a finance department or a billing department who were managing the distribution of the devices, so they could track warranty information and those sorts of items. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And you'll see again under our change history that we track all of this information, so you can see who's setting which information. Now, if there was something under the hardware inventory that we weren't tracking that you would want to see, you can create a custom attribute by going to Manage Custom Attributes, and that will bring you into a different workflow here where you can add a custom attribute. And I'm going to select a date, and I want to know when this was purchased. And I'm going to go ahead and add that, and it will tell me it's been created successfully, and it will show up here. And now if I go back to my iPhone, Again, just using the quick search. And if I go back to the hardware inventory page, you'll see now that I have the new internal purchase date that I can edit and make a date field out of. I'm just going to give my iPhone a quick refresh here and go back to the summary. And here we're still looking at our device information. So the one other item I did want to touch on is our enrollment request. So this is where I was speaking about earlier, where you have the multiple options to do enrollment. And if you decide you want to use passcode, we do offer a bulk enrollment file that you can create to upload phones into the system, so you don't have to do one at a time. And then we also have the mobile intelligence reports, which are 24 hours behind the rest of the portal, as they do require some processing to happen on the back end. But you'll see once you load into them that they'll show you some nice graphs and dashboards that you can drill into to see, for example, how many people have a certain piece of software installed or how many iPhones you have in your environment. So these are more of the graphical interfaces that you'll see that executives like to parse. So while we were waiting here, my iPhone did show up with the passcode, so now it wants me to enter a passcode for my Exchange account again, which I canceled out of earlier, so I'm going to do that again. But you'll see on the screen here, my camera has went away, as has my ability to do FaceTime. So I can still look at my pictures, but I can't take any pictures. So that's just an example of one of the policies that we're able to deploy down to the device. The one last item I'll let you know before we get wrapped up here is we do offer a pretty nice Get Help section, which does give you all of the information that you could need to get started with MaaS360 outside of our presentation here. So we do have the MaaS360 portal and supporting components, which will give you information about the ActiveSync integration, specifically on installing the cloud extender. We do have a pretty nice mobile device FAQ that you can leverage. And then we also show you how you can enable the additional services that I talked through earlier. We get the same information from an ActiveSync and Traveler perspective. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see some of our quick start guides and some of our end-user guides that you can give to your employees while you're working through the testing of MaaS360. The generating and uploading an APNS certificate is the Apple certificate I was referring to earlier, if you do need some assistance working with Apple to get that. And you can download and save that information for use at a later time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe if there's any questions.
Al, thanks. You were really rolling there.
I was.
And everything kind of went smoothly. No network slowdowns with VNC and WebEx and everything kind of hooked together, which was nice. Folks, if you have any questions, this would be a perfect time to send them in via chat. Participation today. Hope you found it useful. We'll be doing this again in June, so we do this one Thursday every month where we do a Getting Started webinar with MaaS360. So we will be doing it again next month. And again, if you're interested, please check out our webinar next week on Enterprise App Stores. We think you'll find that pretty interesting. Thanks again, everyone, and hope to see you again soon at one of our events.
Thank you.
Thanks, Val.